Throw her to the dog. Let's see how the little transfer likes Titan's teeth. Master Chief Ryan Walker drove his boot into the cage bolt and flung the gate open, shoving Captain Olivia Carter forward as 90 pounds of snarling war dog exploded straight at her throat. He wanted her screaming. Every seal on that fence wanted her broken. What none of them knew, what would rip the grin off Walker's face in 3 seconds flat, was that the killer animal he just unleashed to tear her apart was the partner she raised from a pup and buried in her heart 2 years ago. Subscribe, follow this story to the end, and comment the city you are watching from. The dog came out low and fast, ears pinned, flat, a sound, tearing out of his chest that wasn't a bark and wasn't a growl, but something older than both, something that had made grown handlers scramble backward over their own boots. 90 pounds of muscle and scar tissue closed the distance in a blink, and every operator lining that fence leaned in waiting for the scream. Captain Olivia Carter did not scream. She did not raise her arms. She did not step back. She did not do a single one of the things a person that does when a trained attack dog is 3 strides from tearing out their throat. She lowered her chin, let her shoulders drop loose, and she looked straight into the animal's eyes. Not the flinching sideways glance of prey, but the steady, unhurried gaze of somebody who had done this 10,000 times before. And she said one word, quiet, almost gentle. Atlas. The dog's front legs locked mid-stride, his whole body seized as if he'd hit an invisible wall, claws scraping momentum, carrying him into a stumble that ended with him planted 3 feet from her knees, chest heaving, eyes wide and wild, and suddenly terribly searching. For a full 3 seconds, nobody on that yard breathed. Ryan Walker's hand was still on the cage release. His mouth had gone dry. He had watched that dog put 2 grown men in the base infirmary. He had watched a 17-year K-9 veteran hand in his resignation rather than step into a room with the animal. He'd released Titan into that pit, fully expecting to spend the next hour filling out incident paperwork on a female transfer who'd been dumb enough to accept a challenge she didn't understand. He had not expected silence. He had not expected the dog to stop. "What the hell?" somebody muttered behind him. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reyes, 30 feet down the fence line, his arms crossed and his grin gone. "Walker, what the hell is that?" Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was watching the woman crouch slow, so slow, until she was down at the animal's level, her voice dropping to a murmur nobody past the first row could hear. "Hey," she was saying. "Hey, there you are. I've got you. I've got you. It's me." The dog was trembling now, not with rage, with something that looked on a creature that size almost unbearable. His head dropped. And then, in front of 40 of the most hardened operators on the West Coast, the most dangerous K-9 on Naval Base Coronado pressed his skull into the chest of the woman he was supposed to have killed, and he sagged against her like every bone in her body had finally been allowed to give out. Olivia Carter closed her eyes and held him, and Ryan Walker felt the first cold crack of doubt open up in a certainty he'd been carrying for 12 days. 12 days earlier, when she'd first stepped onto his yard, Ryan had made up his mind about Captain Olivia Carter, inside of 90 seconds. He'd seen her file, what little of it wasn't blacked out. Half the pages read like a censored government document, because that's exactly what they were. Prior assignment redacted. Deployment history redacted. 2 commendations he wasn't cleared to read the citations for, and a transfer request that had come down from a command level high enough that nobody on his platoon could tell him why she was here or how long she was staying. A K-9 specialist, he'd said to Reyes that first morning, watching her cross the lot with a single duffel over her shoulder. "From a program nobody's heard of, sent to us. You want to guess who greenlit that?" "Somebody who's never met you," Reyes had said. Ryan hadn't laughed. He'd spent 20 years earning a platoon that ran clean, that trusted each other, that didn't need a babysitter or a headquarters plant or whatever this woman turned out to be. And the thing that bothered him most, the detail that itched at him every time he thought about it, was that she hadn't been assigned here. She'd requested it, specifically by name. Not the unit's name, a dog's name. She'd requested a transfer to Coronado because of one military working dog scheduled for retirement. A dog Ryan had never let her within 100 yards of, because that dog was Titan, and Titan was a problem the command was already quietly making disappear. Captain Carter. He'd met her at the edge of the yard, arms folded, chin up. "Master Chief Walker, I run this platoon. I know who you are." She'd stopped in front of him, Not too close, not too far, steady. Thank you for having me. I didn't have you. Somebody dropped you on me. He'd let that sit. I like to be straight with people, Captain, so I'll be straight with you. I don't know what you did before this, and I'm not cleared to find out. That makes it hard for me to trust you. And on my yard, trust isn't a nice to have. It's the whole job. She'd nodded slowly like she'd expected exactly this. That's fair. Is it? He'd studied her face for a flinch and found none. Then help me understand something. You transferred into an elite SEAL platoon. You could have gone anywhere. And the request that landed on my desk says you came here for a dog we're about to put out to pasture. A dog that's put 2 men in the hospital. Why? For just a moment, half a second, maybe less, something had crossed her face. Ryan had spent 2 decades reading men before firefights, and he knew grief when it walked across somebody's eyes. He saw it there. Then it was gone, packed away somewhere. She clearly kept a lot of things. Because I don't think that dog is what your file says he is, she'd answered. My file says he's a liability. Your file's wrong. He'd almost smiled at the nerve of it. 12 days on a base she'd never set foot on, and she was already telling him his own command was wrong. You've never even seen him, Ryan had said. And she'd looked at him, really looked in a way that had made the back of his neck prickle, and said very quietly, I've seen him more than anyone alive. He'd written it off as arrogance, a specialist's ego. He'd told her to settle into her quarters and stay away from the kennels until he decided what to do with her, and he'd walked away certain he'd read her right. 12 days later, watching her hold a trembling 90-pound war dog in the middle of his fight, Pit Ryan Walker was beginning to understand that he had read her exactly wrong. But that came later. Between the first day in the pit, there were 12 days, and every one of them chipped at him because Olivia Carter did not do what he told her to do. She stayed away from the kennels, technically. She didn't go inside. She didn't touch the animals. She didn't so much as pick up a lead. But every morning before the yard filled up, before the sun was fully over the buildings, Ryan would come out to find her standing at the far fence of Titan's Run. Not moving, not talking, just standing there, hands loose at her sides, watching a bow that wanted to kill her. The first time Reyes reported it, Ryan thought it was a joke. She's just standing there. For like an hour, Chief doesn't do anything. The dog goes nuts, throws himself at the chain link, and she doesn't even blink. Just stands there looking at him. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's what I said. Day 3 now. So Ryan went to see for himself, and there she was, exactly like Reyes had described. Spine straight face, calm, watching Titan hurl himself against the fence in a frenzy of snapping teeth and foam-flecked rage, close enough that the spray of it must have reached her, and she did not move. Captain, Ryan had called out, you're going to get yourself hurt. He can't reach me through the fence, she'd said without turning around. That's not the point. That animal is unstable. I've got a handler in physical therapy because of him. What do you think you're doing? Waiting. For what? She'd finally turned, and there was something in her expression that had stopped him, a patience so deep it looked almost like sorrow, for him to remember. Ryan had stared at her. Remember what? And she'd only turned back to the fence. He'd wanted to order her off. He'd wanted to slap her with an insubordination write-up and ship her back to whatever black budget hole she'd crawled out of. But something held his tongue, the same something that had made his neck prickle on day 1, and so instead he watched. Every morning, from a distance, she pretended not to notice. And on the 6th day, something happened that Ryan Walker would remember for the rest of his life. He came out at dawn to find her at the fence, same as always. And Titan wasn't throwing himself against the chain link. Titan was standing very still on the other side of it, 12 feet back, watching her with his head cocked and his ears half up, and there wasn't a growl in him. There wasn't rage. There was something Ryan didn't have a word for. The dog took a step forward. Olivia didn't move. Another step, then another. Slow, uncertain. And then 10 feet from a woman he'd been trying to kill for 6 days, the most dangerous canine on the base lowered his back into the ground and sat. He sat and he looked at her and he waited. Ryan felt the hair stand up on his arms. Reyes, he said very quietly to the man beside him, are you seeing this? I'm seeing it, Chief, Reyes breathed. I don't believe it, but I'm seeing it. That afternoon, Ryan Walker went back to his office, pulled up every layer of clearance he had, and started digging into Captain Olivia Carter for real. What he found took him 3 days to piece together, and it turned everything he thought he knew inside out. Half of it was still redacted, but the shape of what was underneath the redactions was enough. Olivia Carter wasn't a specialist who had read a lot of manuals. She was a combat veteran. Multiple deployments, the kind that didn't get talked about, run by units that didn't officially exist. There was a citation, mostly blacked out, that referenced her pulling 4 wounded operators out of an ambush under fire alongside her dog before extraction. There was another that he genuinely couldn't read past the first line, and the first line was enough to make him sit back in his chair. And there was the dog. Ryan had assumed, like everyone else, that Titan was just a hard case. A K9 that had washed out somewhere, gone sour, gotten shuffled around until he landed on Coronado's problem list. That was what the intake paperwork said. Origin transfer. Prior handler none listed. Behavioral history, aggressive, unstable, unsuitable for redeployment. But when Ryan cross-referenced the dog's chip number against the classified database, he wasn't supposed to have on his desktop a different record surfaced. An older one, from before Titan was Titan. The dog's original name was Atlas, and his handler of record for 3 years across 2 deployments and 1 commendation, Ryan wasn't cleared to read, was Captain Olivia Carter. Ryan sat with that for a long time. She hadn't come here for a dog she'd never met. She'd come here for a dog she'd raised from a pup, a partner she'd worked beside in combat for 3 years until the record went dark right there, an entire operation swallowed by redaction, a date, and a black bar, and nothing else. And after that date, Atlas vanished from her file entirely. Reassigned, renamed, his history scrubbed and rewritten. A 3-year combat record erased and replaced with 2 words, origin transfer. Somebody had taken this woman's partner, wiped his identity, and handed him to a base full of strangers as a defective piece of equipment, and she had spent 2 years finding him. Ryan called her into his office that evening. She came in calm as ever and stood at ease in front of his desk. "You lied to me," he said. "I never lied to you. You told me you'd seen that dog more than anyone alive." "That's true." Ryan turned the monitor around so she could see the record on it, watched her face, watched the calm crack just slightly at the sight of the name Atlas on a screen after 2 years of it being gone. "His name is Atlas," Ryan said. "You raised him. He was your partner. And somebody erased him and dumped him here to be put down, and you tracked him across the entire country to a base that didn't want you, to a platoon that didn't trust you, and you never said a word of it to my face." Her jaw was tight. When she spoke, her voice was rough at the edges. "Would you have let me near him if I had—" Ryan opened his mouth, closed it. The honest answer was no. If she'd walked in on day 1 and claimed a personal history with the most dangerous animal on the base, he'd have flagged her as compromised and locked her out of the kennels entirely. She'd known that. She'd played it exactly the way she had to. "Why did they take him?" Ryan asked. "Why erase his record?" And for the first time since she'd arrived, Olivia Carter looked at him like she'd decided he might be worth telling the truth to. "That," she said, "is what I came here to find out." You see? The next morning, Ryan let her into the kennel. He shouldn't have. Every protocol on the base said no. But he stood at the door of Titan's Run with his hand on his sidearm and his heart in his throat, and he watched Captain Carter walk in alone, unarmed, and crouched down inside the reach of a dog that had hospitalized 2 grown men. "Atlas," she said softly, and the dog came to her. Not fast, not slow. He crossed the run, and he lay down and he put his enormous scarred head in her lap, and Olivia Carter bent over him and shook just once, a single hard shudder through her whole body, and Ryan had to look away because there are things a man isn't supposed to watch. "He's not aggressive," she said when she got her voice back. Her hand moved slowly over the dog's ears. "Everyone here looked at him and saw a weapon that malfunctioned. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Ryan asked from the doorway. "He's afraid." She said it flatly like a diagnosis. "Every second of everyone. Watch him, the way he keeps his back to a corner, the way he tracks the exits, the way he goes off the second someone reaches for him fast." Her hand kept moving steady and slow. "This isn't a dog that wants to hurt people, Master Chief. This is a mind that's convinced everyone in the world is about to hurt him. And a play like that, cornered, backed into a run with strangers grabbing at him, of course he bit. Of course he threw himself at the fence. He was defending his life. He's been defending his life for 2 years. Ryan looked at the animal in her lap, the dog he'd been ready to sign off on as a lost cause, and he tried for the first time to see what she was seeing. "I've had canines my whole career," he said slowly. "I've never seen one act like this. Where does a dog even learn that? To be scared of everything all the time?" Olivia went very still. "That's the question," she said quietly. "Isn't it?" Joya. It should have ended there. A reunion, a misunderstanding corrected, a good dog given back his name. But Olivia Carter was not a woman who let a question go once it had its hooks in her, and the question would not let go of her either. Where does a dog learn to be terrified of the entire human race, not on any base she'd ever served, not in any program she recognized? Something had happened to Atlas in the 2 years he'd been gone. The 2 years his record was a black bar, and the more she turned it over, the less she liked the shape of it. She started asking questions, carefully. The way you ask questions when you've spent your career around things you weren't clear to know. And every door she pushed on was already locked. She requested Titan's full medical intake, got 3 pages of a file that should have been 30. She asked where he'd been transferred from, got a facility name that when she looked it up turned out to belong to no branch of the military at all. A private contractor. She asked about the contractor and got a wall of company with a government relationship classified so far above her clearance that the mere act of asking earned her a phone call. "Captain Carter." The voice on the line was polite and utterly without warmth. "It's come to our attention you've been requesting records outside your area of responsibility." "I'm the handler of record for the animal in question," Olivia said evenly. "I have a right to his medical history." "You were the handler of record. That designation was superseded. The animal's history is not your concern, and I'd encourage you to remember that your continued service depends on a certain amount of discretion. Do we understand each other?" She understood him perfectly. That was the problem. She told Ryan about the call that night in the empty mess, both of them nursing coffee gone cold. "They're not warning me off a dog," she said. "Nobody makes a call like that over one washed-out K9. They're warning me off whatever happened to him." Ryan frowned. "And you don't know what that is?" "Not yet." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "But I know how to find out. Atlas can't tell me, so I go to the other dogs." "What other dogs?" "That's what I want to know," she said. "How many other dogs came out of that contractor? How many other handlers lost their partner to a black bar in a file? Because I promise you, Master Chief, a program doesn't build one Atlas. Whatever they did to him, they did it more than once." Ryan Walker looked at the woman across the table, the transfer he'd been so sure was a plant, the specialist he'd tried to lock out of his own kennels, and he felt the last of his certainty about her go quiet and cold. "You know what happens," he said slowly, "if you're right." "Yeah." Olivia's eyes didn't waver. "It stops being about a dog." So, 3 days later, the command tried to shut her down for good. They didn't call it that. They called it an evaluation, a performance review flagged by concerns regarding Captain Carter's focus and unit integration. It landed on Ryan's desk with orders to recommend her reassignment, a quiet transfer off Coronado back into the machine that had lost track of her once already, where a woman asking dangerous questions could be filed away somewhere she couldn't reach a phone. And attached to it almost as an afterthought was a second order, RAMWD Titan. Given failure to rehabilitate and continued liability animal to be removed from service. Termination approved pending final behavioral evaluation. Ryan read it twice. They weren't just getting rid of her, they were getting rid of the dog, and they were doing it fast before she could find whatever it was she was looking for, because a dead dog can't be examined and a reassigned handler can't ask questions. He found her at the fence line that evening in the west of the light, standing where she always stood watching Atlas doze in the run. "They sign in the order," he said. She didn't turn. "Which one?" "Both." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was very steady, and that steadiness was somehow worse than if it had shaken. "When?" "Final behavioral evaluation, 3 days out. They fail him and they will fail him, Carter. They've got it rigged. No dog passes an eval that's designed to be failed. They put him down and I get orders to sign your transfer the same afternoon." He shook his head. "It's clean. It's fast. In a week, none of this ever happened." Olivia finally turned to face him. And Ryan braced for anger for a fight for the specialist's ego he'd expected on day one to come roaring out now that they were taking her partner a second time. Instead, she just looked tired. Tired in a way that went down to the bone. They already took him from me once, she said. They erased 3 years of his life and mine. They turned him into something so afraid of the world, he tried to kill the people who came near him. And now they want to put him down for being what they made him. Her jaw worked. For being afraid. Because they broke him and they can't stand to be reminded of it. Carter, I'm not going to let it happen. She said it flat and final, and there wasn't heat in it, which was how Ryan knew she meant it all the way down. I don't care what they signed. I don't care whose call it takes. That dog is not going to die 3 days from now for the crime of surviving what they did to him. And Ryan Walker, 20 years in a platoon full of men who trusted him, a career built on doing things clean, and by the book heard himself say something he had never once expected to say to this woman. Then we don't let it happen. She blinked. We. You heard me. He surprised himself with how steady it came out. I've spent 12 days trying to figure out what you are. I thought you were a plant. I thought you were an ego. I thought you were a liability I got stuck with. He looked past her at the dog in the run. Turns out you're the only person on this whole base who looked at a broken animal everybody else wanted to put down and saw something worth saving. That's not a liability, Captain. That's the thing I've spent my whole career trying to teach men to be. Olivia stared at him. You realize, she said slowly, what it costs you to stand next to me on this. They're not just after a dog. Somebody with a lot of authority buried a program and I'm about to dig it up. You put your name next to mine and it's your career too. I know exactly what it costs. Ryan's voice didn't waver. I've watched you for 12 days. I watched that dog choose you when he'd chosen nobody. I've been in this long enough to know that when an animal that's been hurt that badly decides to trust one person in the entire world, that person is worth trusting too. He held out his hand. I'm in, all the way in. Now tell me how we save him. And for the first time since she'd walked onto his yard, Captain Olivia Carter smiled small and worn and real, and she took his hand. First, she said, we don't wait for their evaluation. Meaning what? Meaning they built a test designed to fail him. Her eyes had gone sharp now, the tiredness burning off into something focused and dangerous. So we give them one he can't fail, in front of everyone, where they can't quietly rig the paperwork afterward because 40 operators will have seen the truth with their own eyes. She looked at him. You said trust is the whole job. Let me show your platoon what trust actually looks like. Let me show them what he actually is. Ryan felt something turn over in his chest, anticipation maybe, or the first clean thing he'd felt in 12 days. You want to run him yourself, in front of the platoon. I want to run him in front of everyone who ever looked at him and saw a monster. Her voice dropped and there was steel in it now. The steel he should have heard on day one if he hadn't been so sure he already knew her. And I want the men who signed that order to have to watch. I want it on the record. I want it undeniable. She looked back at the dog in the run and her whole face softened for just a moment. They took his name once. They don't get to take it again. Ryan looked at the animal she loved, the animal that had put 2 men in the hospital, the animal the entire command had written off as a lost cause, the animal that had crossed a run to lay his head in her lap. 3 days, he said. We've got 3 days before their eval. We make our stand before that. We make our stand before that. Behind the chain link, as if he'd heard his name in the fading light, Atlas lifted his great scarred head, found the shape of the woman at the fence, and slowly, carefully, like a creature relearning something he'd been made to forget, thumped his tail once against the ground. Olivia Carter looked at her partner through the fence that had held him for 2 years, and she made him a promise without saying a word. Nisham, I know. Not again. Never again. I found you once. I'm not losing you twice. They didn't sleep that night. There wasn't time, and neither of them wanted to. Ryan pulled 2 chairs into the empty office off the kennel corridor, dragged a whiteboard in from the briefing room, and by the time the base had gone quiet around them, Olivia Carter had laid out everything she knew across it in that flat, fast operator's shorthand that told him more about her old life than any redacted file ever could. Walk me through it, he said. Start to finish. What do we actually have? We have a dog they want dead in 3 days, Olivia said, and a paper trail somebody already cut. That's what we have. She tapped the board. So we stop thinking about what we can prove on paper. Paper's their game. They own the paper. We play a different one, which is witnesses. She turned to face him. You said it yourself, Master Chief. Trust is the whole job on this yard. Your men trust their eyes, so we don't fight this in a file room. We fight it in the open in front of every operator on this base where the truth is something you can watch happen. Ryan folded his arms. You want to run him, publicly, before their evaluation so the record's already written by the time they show up to rig one. That's the shape of it. And if he fails, if he breaks in front of 40 men and puts a third one in the hospital, something flickered behind her eyes, and for a second, the steadiness she wore like armor thinned out. And he saw the fear underneath it, real human fear. The fear of a person betting everything on a creature that had already been broken once. Then I lose him anyway, she said quietly. Except I lose him tomorrow instead of in 3 days, and I lose him having tried. She held his gaze. But he won't fail. Not for me. You've seen it. I've seen him lie down in your lap, Ryan said. That's not the same as holding it together with strangers grabbing at him and noise and pressure and men he doesn't know screaming commands. You know that better than I do. I do know it. She sat down heavily, which is why we don't have 3 days of prep. We have 3 days to give a dog back 2 years of confidence. Somebody spent 2 years beating out of him. She rubbed her face. It's not enough. It's nowhere close to enough. Then why do it? She looked up at him, and the answer was simple, and it went all the way down. Because the alternative is a needle, she said. And I didn't drive across a country to watch him get put down for being afraid. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled his chair around, sat down across from her, and picked up the marker. All right, he said. Then teach me, because I'm going to be standing next to that dog when it counts. And if I don't understand what he needs, I'm a liability. So teach me. What broke him? And how do we get around it in 3 days? And for the second time that night, Olivia Carter looked at the seal she'd been so sure would never let her near the kennel and decided to trust him. She started with Atlas before dawn, not commands, not drills. She'd learned a long time ago that you couldn't drill trust into an animal any more than you could drill it into a man, and the thing that had been done to Atlas had used drills as the weapon. So she did the one thing the program never had. She let him choose. Watch his feet, she told Ryan. Lo, the two of them crouched outside the open run, while the dog stood frozen at the back of it, ears half up, reading them both. Not his teeth. Everybody watches the teeth. The teeth are the last thing that happens. The feet tell you everything first. His feet are planted. His feet are planted because he's decided we're a threat and he's calculating the exits. Look back, corner both walls covered, he can see the door. That's not aggression, Master Chief. That's a soldier who never got to stand down. She kept her voice easy, unhurried, pitched under the level a raised human voice ever reached. So we don't push. We wait. We make the safest thing in his world the same thing every single time. Us. Not moving toward him. Us. Ryan watched the dog watch them. How long does that take? Normally months. Her mouth tightened. We've got until tomorrow night. She stayed low. She didn't reach. And after a long while, long enough that Ryan's knees were screaming and he didn't dare shift, Atlas took one step out of his corner. Then stopped. Read them again. Took another. Easy, Olivia breathed. Not to the dog, to Ryan. Don't change anything. Don't get excited. The second he feels a spike off you, he reads it as a threat. Stay boring. Stay boring. Stay safe. I'm boring, Ryan murmured. I'm the most boring man alive. Something that might have been a laugh caught in Olivia's throat, and Atlas, as if the small human sound had told him something, the whole standoff hadn't closed the last of the distance, and pressed his scarred head against her shoulder hard and let out a breath that shuddered the whole length of him. There he is, she whispered. Her hand came up slow and settled on the back of his neck. There you are. Ryan Walker, 20 years a SEAL, watched a dog everyone had written off as a lost cause, lean his full weight into a woman he was supposed to have killed, and felt something in his chest he didn't have a name for and wasn't sure he'd ever felt on this yard before. Okay, he said rough. Okay, what's next? What was next was the platoon, and the platoon was not the dog. The dog only needed to trust one person. The men needed to be turned, and men were harder than dogs because men had pride. And pride doesn't lie down in your lap when you wait long enough. Reyes found them mid-morning. He stood at the edge of the run with his arms crossed and his jaw set and the look of a man who'd heard something he didn't like. "Chief, a word." Ryan stepped out. "Reyes, is it true?" Reyes kept his voice down, but there was heat under it. "Word going around is you're running the demon dog tomorrow. In front of everyone. With her." He jerked his chin at Olivia without looking at her. "That true? It's true." Chief Reyes exhaled hard. "That animal put Delgado in a sling for 6 weeks. He put Barnes in the infirmary with 20 stitches. I was there for Barnes. I saw it. And now you want to stand in a ring with him and vouch for him in front of the whole platoon." He shook his head. "I've followed you into places I shouldn't have walked out of. I'd follow you into more, but this isn't a mission, Chief. This is a woman we don't know talking you into betting your name on a dog that's already drawn blood twice." Ryan let him finish, then he said quietly, "You done?" "I'm done." "Good, now come here." Ryan stepped aside so Reyes could see through the open run door. "And look at him. Not the file, not what happened to Barnes. Him, right now. Tell me what you see." Reyes looked, and what he saw was a 90-pound war dog lying with his head in a woman's lap, eyes half-closed tail, moving in slow sweeps while she ran her hand down his spine and murmured something too soft to hear. Reyes was quiet a long moment. "That's not the same dog," he said finally. "It's exactly the same dog," Olivia said, not looking up. "That's the whole point, Chief. It was always the same dog. You just never saw this half of him because nobody ever gave him a reason to show it." Reyes stared. "How?" "He was hurt." She said it simply. "The way a man gets hurt, the kind you can't see, the kind that makes you flinch at a hand coming up too fast even when the hand's your friend's." She finally looked at him. "You've served with men like that. I know you have. You don't put them down, Chief. You bring them home." Reyes didn't answer that, but Ryan watched something move across his old friend's face, recognition maybe, or the memory of somebody, and he knew the way you know things about a man you have bled beside that Reyes wouldn't be the one to fight them tomorrow. "If that dog so much as looks wrong at you in that ring," Reyes said finally, "I'm coming in. I don't care whose partner he was." "If he looks wrong at me in that ring," Olivia said, "I'll deserve it." She held out her hand. "Deal." Reyes looked at the hand a long moment, then he shook it. "Deal," he said. "God help us all." But the platoon was only half the problem, and while she rebuilt the dog through the day and turned the men one hard conversation at a time, Olivia never stopped working the other half. The half nobody had ordered dead because you can't sign a termination order on a question. She made a call that afternoon that she'd been putting off for 2 years. The man who answered hadn't spoken to her since the operation that put a black bar through both their files. Sergeant First Class Danny Vega, her old teammate, the one other person alive who'd been on the ground the day everything went dark. "Carter." His voice was careful the second he heard hers. Too careful. "I wondered if you'd ever call this number. I need to ask you something, Danny, and I need you to tell me the truth even if somebody told you not to." A pause, a long one. "Ask. Atlas, after the op, after we lost." She stopped, started again. "After that day they took him, reassigned him, wiped his file, dumped him on a base as a defective K-9. You were still in when it happened. You saw the paperwork move." "Carter. Where did they send him first, Danny?" The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. "You don't want to pull this thread," Vega said finally, and his voice had dropped, gone quiet in the way a man's voice goes quiet when he's checking the room around him. "I mean it. I've watched people pull it. It doesn't end where you think it ends." Her grip tightened on the phone. "Then it doesn't end where I think it ends. Where did they send him?" Another pause. And then so low she almost missed it. "There was a contractor, ran a program out of a facility that doesn't have a name I'm allowed to say. They took the dogs nobody would miss, the ones whose handlers were gone, KIA, reassign, discharged, dogs that had nobody left to ask questions." A breath. "Atlas had you, Carter, but you were off the grid on assignment. As far as the paper was concerned, he had nobody, so they took him." Olivia closed her eyes. Something cold was building in her chest. "What did they do to him, Danny?" "I don't know all of it. I swear to you I don't. His voice cracked just slightly. But I know they were trying to build a dog you didn't have to bond with. A dog that would obey any handler instantly, no relationship, no trust, plug and play. You know how long it takes to build a real working dog, 3 years, 4, and it dies with its handler half the time. They wanted to skip all that. They wanted a weapon they could hand to anybody. You can't skip that, Olivia said. Her voice had gone flat and dangerous. There's no skipping that. The bond isn't a delay in the process. The bond is the process. I know that. You know that. A bitter breath. They didn't care. And when you can't build obedience out of trust, Carter, you build it out of the only other thing that works. She already knew. She'd known since the first morning that she'd watched Atlas track the exits. Fear, she said. Fear, Vega confirmed quietly. They ran them on fear. And Atlas, his voice broke properly now. Atlas fought at Carter. That's what I heard. He was the one that wouldn't take, wouldn't break clean, kept looking for something, for somebody. They marked him a failure and cut him loose because he wouldn't stop looking for you. Olivia Carter stood very still in the empty corridor with the phone against her ear and 2 years of not knowing collapsing into one unbearable fact. He'd been looking for her the whole time. Every stranger's hand, every drill, every cold procedure meant to burn her out of him, and he'd refused, and they'd punished him for it and called the refusal a defect. Danny, she said, and her voice was steady only because she'd forced it there. How many others? What? How many other dogs? You said they took the ones nobody would miss. How many? The silence this time was different. It was the silence of a man deciding whether to say the thing that couldn't be unsaid. More than one, Carter, Vega said at last. A lot more than one. And here's the part that'll keep you up nights. The handlers. A breath. Some of those handlers weren't KIA when the dogs got taken. Some of them got reassigned right before. Moved out of the way. Convenient. His voice dropped to almost nothing. Somebody was clearing the board so nobody would be around to ask where the dogs went. The cold in her chest turned to ice. You're saying they separated handlers from partners on purpose, she said slowly, to harvest the dogs. I'm saying I don't know, Vega said, but I'm saying if I were you, I'd stop asking. And I'm saying you won't because I know you. So watch your back, Carter. Whatever they did to Atlas, they did it because somebody with real authority wanted it done. And people like that don't lose gracefully. A pause. Take care of him. He earned it. He earned it more than any dog I ever saw. The line went dead. Olivia Carter stood alone in the corridor for a long moment. Then she walked back to the run, sat down beside the dog, who'd spent 2 years looking for her, put her arms around his neck, and let herself for exactly 30 seconds feel all of it. Then she stood up, wiped her face, and got back to work. Because 30 seconds was all the time the world had ever given her to grieve, and it was all she'd take now. She told Ryan that night, all of it. He didn't say anything for a long time after she finished. He just sat there and the muscle in his jaw worked, and when he finally spoke, his voice was different than she'd heard it before. So it's not one dog, he said. It's not one dog. It's a program that took working animals from handlers who couldn't fight back, that ran them on fear until they broke, that threw away the ones who wouldn't break and then buried the paperwork. He said each piece slowly like he was setting stones in a wall. And your partner is the one they threw away because he wouldn't stop looking for you. Yes. Ryan stood up. He walked to the window and he stood there a long moment with his back to her. I've spent 20 years, he said, telling young men that the bond is everything, that the guy next to you is the reason you come home, that you don't leave your people. That's the whole faith, Carter. That's the thing we die for. He turned around and his eyes were hard as she'd ever seen them. And somebody took that exact thing, that bond, the most sacred thing I know, and figured out how to weaponize its absence. Built a machine to strip it out of an animal on purpose because trust was too slow for them. Yes, Olivia said quietly. No, Ryan's voice was flat and final. No, that doesn't stand. Not on my watch, not near my men, not to a dog that's lying 20 feet from where I'm standing because he refused to stop being loyal. He crossed to her. You came here for one dog, I understand that. But you were right the first night it stopped being about one dog the second you found out there were others. It's dangerous, Ryan. Danny didn't say that as a figure of speech. Somebody with authority buried this. If we pull, I know exactly who's got authority around here, Ryan said, and starting tomorrow, so will they. He looked at the whiteboard at the tangle of black bars and dead ends. We save Atlas first, publicly, undeniably. We make it so that when they come to put him down, 40 witnesses stand between them and the needle. And then, his jaw set, then we find every other dog in that program and every handler they cut out of the picture and we drag the whole thing into the daylight. Olivia looked at him. You realize what you're volunteering for? I realize I've spent 2 decades saying I'd never leave a soldier behind, Ryan said. And I just found out somebody's been doing exactly that wholesale to soldiers who happen to walk on 4 legs and can't file a complaint. He shook his head. If I look away from that now, everything I ever taught was a lie. So no, we don't look away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then from the run, Atlas lifted his head, looked between the 2 humans as if he understood every word and thumped his tail once against the floor. He agrees, Olivia said, and her voice cracked on it, and she laughed to cover the crack. Smart dog, Ryan said. They came for her the next morning, and they came early, and they came with more authority than she'd expected. Ryan got the call at first light, and his face changed the second he heard the name. He hung up slowly. Change of plans, he said. What? Commander Elias Doyle just landed on my base. Ryan's voice was tight. He didn't route through channels. He didn't give notice. He flew in overnight and he's asking for you by name and for the dog by number. He looked at her and he moved the evaluation up. Olivia went still. To when? Today. The word landed like a hit. Today, she repeated. They can't. We're not. They can and they did. That's why he flew in overnight, Carter. Somebody up the chain got wind that we were about to run our own demonstration and put the truth on the record before their rigged evil could bury it. Ryan's jaw worked. So they're not giving us 3 days. They're not even giving us today to prep. Doyle wants the evaluation this afternoon, his people, his terms, his rules. Which means his outcome, Olivia said flatly. She was already moving, already thinking. It's designed to fail, Danny warned me. They'll run him hot stack, the handlers put pressure on him from 3 directions at once, and when he cracks, they'll have their paperwork and their needle and their 40 witnesses seeing exactly what they want them to see. She turned. Who's Doyle? Officially command oversight for special K-9 programs. Signs off on classified transfers, evaluations, terminations. Ryan's mouth was a hard line. Unofficially, I made some calls last night after you went to bed. Doyle's name is on the transfer that moved Atlas into that contractor's facility 2 years ago. The floor dropped out of Olivia's stomach. He's the one who took him. He's the one who signed the order that took him, Ryan said. And now he's flown across the country to personally make sure the dog gets put down before anybody can prove what was done to him. He looked at her. This isn't oversight, Carter. This is cleanup. He's here to close a loose end, and the loose end is Atlas. And by now, probably you too, soon. Commander Elias Doyle did not look like a villain, and that was the worst part. He was polished. He was calm. He shook Ryan's hand with the easy warmth of a man who'd spent a career making people comfortable, right up until the moment he ruined them. And when he turned that warmth on Olivia, she felt every hair on her arms stand up. Captain Carter. His smile never touched his eyes. I've heard so much about you. The specialist who came all this way for one dog. It's touching, really. Genuinely. Loyalty like that is rare. Commander. She kept her voice flat and even. I understand you moved the evaluation up. I did. I'm a busy man and I saw no reason to drag it out. He spread his hands. The animal's a documented liability. 2 injured handlers, a behavioral profile that's frankly a lawsuit waiting to happen. I'd be failing in my duty if I let it linger on active status one day longer than necessary. His smile widened a fraction. But you'll have your chance. That's what an evaluation is. If the animal performs, if it can track, respond, take handler commands, and execute a controlled attack and recall under pressure, then perhaps I've read the file wrong. He tilted his head. You'd like that chance, wouldn't you? It was a trap, and they both knew it was a trap, and he wanted her to know he knew. I'd like that chance, Olivia said. Yes, wonderful. Doyle turned to go, then paused as if a small thought had occurred to him. Oh, and Captain, one condition. For the evaluation to be valid, the animal has to demonstrate it'll take commands from a handler. It doesn't have he searched for the word delicately, personal relationship with. That's the whole point of a working dog after all. It has to be reliable for anyone, not just its favorite person. So the controlled release portion won't be run by you. His eyes glittered. It'll be run by Master Chief Walker. Ryan went rigid. You want me to run the release? I want the animal to demonstrate it can be controlled by a handler other than the captain, Doyle said smoothly. You're the platoon lead. You're the natural choice. Unless you don't trust the animal, Master Chief, in which case, well, that rather makes my point for me, doesn't it? The silence hung, and Olivia understood all at once the exact shape of the trap. They weren't just going to fail the dog. They were going to force Ryan Walker, the man who'd finally chosen to stand beside her, to be the one holding the lead when the dog broke. They were going to make her ally the instrument of Atlas's death, put it on him, split them, and leave her standing alone with a dead partner and a friend who'd released the animal that killed his reputation. It was elegant. It was cruel. It was designed to destroy all three of them at once. I'll do it, Ryan said. Ryan heard Olivia started. I said I'll do it. He didn't look at her. He looked at Doyle and his voice was perfectly steady. You want me to run the release, Commander? I'll run the release. I've handled harder dogs than this one. Doyle's smile flickered just slightly, just for an instant, as if he'd expected fear and gotten something else. This afternoon then, he said, 1500. The whole platoon will observe. It'll all be very transparent. He nodded to them both. I do hope the animal surprises me, Captain. Truly, I'd hate for this to end the way the file says it will. He walked away. Olivia waited until he was out of earshot. Then she turned on Ryan. Why did you agree to that? Oh, because if I hadn't, he'd have put a stranger on the lead, Ryan said quietly, still watching Doyle's retreating back. Some handler of his choosing who'd yanked the wrong way at the wrong moment and on purpose. At least if it's me, I know what the dog needs. At least if it's me, I'll do everything right. He finally looked at her. You've got until 1500 to teach me how to hold that lead so he doesn't break. Can you do it? Olivia stared at him. At the man who'd been ready to fail her on day one, who'd just walked into a trap with his eyes open because it was the only way to give the dog a fighting chance. He set it up so you'd be the one, she said. So if it goes wrong, it's your name, your hand on the lead, your career. He's trying to split us. I know exactly what he's trying to do, Ryan said. So let's not give it to him. Teach me the lead, Carter. We've got 6 hours. Let's not waste them being afraid. 6 hours. She told him 3 days wasn't enough. Now they had 6 hours and a public evaluation designed to fail, and a commander who'd flown across a country to make sure a dog died before it could testify with its own broken body to what had been done to it. She should have been paralyzed. Instead, something cold and clear settled over Olivia Carter, the thing that had come over her on every op that had gone sideways, the thing that had kept 4 men alive when everything went dark and she started to move. Okay, she said. Here's what you need to understand, and you need to understand it in your bones, not your head, because he'll feel the difference. She pulled Ryan down to the run, to where Atlas lay watching them. The release isn't the hard part. Any dog can be sent. The hard part is the recall, pulling him off, full engagement, adrenaline, red line teeth already committed. That's the command every dog in that program failed. That's the command they're counting on him to fail. Because you can't force a recall, Ryan. You can't muscle it. A dog that's been trained on fear will not recall because in his head the attack is survival, and you don't stand down from survival on somebody's order. So how do I recall him? You don't. She looked at him. I do. Ryan frowned. Doyle said you run the release. He didn't say a word about the recall. Because in his mind, the recall is the part that fails, so who calls it doesn't matter. The dog won't come off either way. Her eyes sharpened. He built a trap around the assumption that Atlas can't recall for anybody. He's about to find out he's wrong, because Atlas will recall, not for the lead, not for the command, for me. Her voice dropped fierce and low. That's the thing they spent 2 years trying to burn out of him and couldn't. That's the defect they threw him away for. And it's about to be the thing that saves his life in front of 40 witnesses in the man who tried to bury him. Ryan looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly something that was almost a smile came to his face, grim and hard and real. He wants a dog that'll take you any handler, Ryan said. Right. And you're going to give him a dog that will do everything right for a stranger's hand, track, respond, engage, and then at the one moment it counts, come off a full attack for one voice and one voice only. Ryan's grim smile widened. You're going to prove the exact thing he's trying to erase, in front of everyone. That the bond he tried to destroy is the strongest thing on that field. That's the plan, Olivia said. That's the whole plan. We don't beat his evaluation by passing it. We beat it by turning it into the proof. He'll be furious. Let him be furious, Olivia said. Furious men make mistakes. And I want him making mistakes in front of your platoon because a room full of SEALs who just watch the truth with their own eyes is the one thing a black bar in a file can't erase. They worked until the lights started to go. She taught him the lead, how to hold it loose, not tight, because tension traveled down the line, straight into the dog, and read as threat. She taught him the stance, the breath, the voice pitched low and flat. She taught him to be the boring, safe, unchanging thing, because that was the only kind of stranger Atlas could tolerate. And she taught Atlas, too, hour after hour, the same patient work she'd told Ryan would take months compressed into a single impossible afternoon. She let the dog get used to Ryan's hand on the lead. Let him learn that this new human, whatever else he was safe. Let him practice the one thing that mattered above all others, the sound of her voice cutting through everything, and the deep-buried instinct to come home to it. By the time the lights started failing, Atlas would take the lead from Ryan without flinching. He'd track, sit, respond. And when Olivia said his name, his real name, the one they'd tried to erase, he would break off anything at all, and cross the ground to her like the 2 years had never happened. He's got it, she said finally, and her voice was hoarse. As much as he's going to have it in 6 hours, he's got it. Ryan crouched by the dog, ran a careful hand down the scarred back. And if Doyle changes the rules on the field, if he doesn't let you call the recall. Olivia was quiet a moment. Then we improvise, she said, the way we always did. She looked at the dog and at the man, and something in her chest that had been clenched tight for 2 years loosened just slightly. But he won't. He's too sure of himself. That's the thing about men like Doyle, Reese, or Ryan. They've won so many times they can't imagine losing. He's going to hand me the exact rope I need to hang his whole program, and he's going to do it smiling because he's certain the dog is broken. Her jaw set. He doesn't know Atlas. He thinks he knows what he did to him. But he never once in 2 years understood what he couldn't take out. Which is, Olivia looked at the babe who'd crossed a country in her heart and refused through every cruelty to stop being who he was. Loyalty, she said quietly. You can hurt it. You can starve it. You can punish it and call it a defect and throw it away. But you can't manufacture it, and you can't kill it, and you sure as hell can't fake it. She stood, and there was iron in her, now the iron of a soldier walking toward the fight she'd crossed a country for. In 3 hours, Commander Doyle is going to stand in front of 40 men and try to prove that a dog is nothing but a weapon. And Atlas is going to prove in front of every one of them that he was never a weapon at all. She looked at Ryan. He was a soldier, she said, and soldiers don't stop being loyal just because somebody decided it was inconvenient. Ryan Walker stood and put his hand on the shoulder of the woman he'd been so sure was a liability, and found that somewhere in the last 3 days she'd become something else, entirely the best operator he'd stood beside in 20 years, and she didn't even carry a weapon. 3 hours, he said. Let's go get our dog his name back. And down in the run, as the two humans turned toward the fight ahead, Atlas rose to his feet, shook himself once from nose to tail, and stood steady, unafraid, ready, the way he'd stood 100 times beside her before the world went dark. As if he knew. As if after 2 years of waiting, he finally understood that the waiting was over, and whatever came next this time, he would not be facing it alone. 1,500 came fast. The whole platoon was there, just as Doyle had promised. 40 operators lined along the training ground, arms crossed, faces carefully neutral, in the way men keep their faces neutral when they have been told to watch something they're not sure they want to see. Word had traveled. Everybody knew what today was. Everybody knew the demon dog was being run one last time, and everybody knew the new transfer had staked her whole reason for being here on him, and everybody had an opinion they were keeping behind their teeth. Commander Elias Doyle stood at the center of it all with a clipboard and that same easy, terrible smile, And beside him stood two men Olivia had never seen his people flown in, with him wearing the kind of blank competence that told her exactly what they were. Handlers. His handlers. The ones who'd run the stacked commands and put the pressure on from three directions and manufacture the failure the paperwork already predicted. Captain Carter. Doyle's voice carried. He wanted it to carry. He wanted every man there to hear how reasonable he was. Master Chief Walker, right on time. I appreciate punctuality. He gestured at the course laid out behind him. I'll keep this simple for everyone's benefit. The animal will run a standard working evaluation. Tracking, obedience under multiple handlers, threat response, and a controlled engagement with recall. He turned the smile on the watching men. If it passes, it returns to service. If it fails, and I want to be very clear that I hope it doesn't, then it's my duty to remove it. That's not cruelty, gentlemen, that's responsibility. An unreliable weapon endangers everyone who stands near it. A murmur moved through the platoon. Olivia didn't look at it. She was watching Atlas in the run at the edge of the field, standing quiet and steady with his eyes fixed on her. Stay with me, she thought. Whatever they throw at you, stay with me. I'm right here. One more thing, Doyle added, as if it had just occurred to him, though nothing about the man ever just occurred to him. For the evaluation to mean anything the animal has to perform for handlers it doesn't know. A working dog serves the mission, not one person. So the obedience portion will be run by my two specialists here. He nodded to the blank-faced men, and the release as we discussed by Master Chief Walker. His eyes slid to Olivia, glittering. The captain will observe, from the line, with everyone else. There it was, the last turn of the trap. They weren't even going to let her on the field. Olivia felt Ryan tense beside her, felt him about to speak, and she stopped him with two fingers against his forearm. Not yet, not now. Don't hand Doyle a reaction. She kept her face perfectly still, and she said evenly, Understood, Commander. Doyle's smile flickered, that same tiny flicker she'd seen that morning. The flicker of a man who'd expected a fight and got compliance and couldn't tell if it meant he'd won or missed something. Wonderful, he said. Then let's begin. They brought Atlas out. The whole platoon went quiet. 40 men who'd heard the stories, who'd seen Barnes's stitches, who'd watched this animal throw himself at chain link hard enough to bloody his own mouth. 40 men held their breath as the most dangerous K9 on the base walked onto the field. And Atlas walked calm, ears up but not pinned, feet loose, eyes moving, tracking, reading, but not the frantic exit hunting Olivia had watched that first morning. He walked onto that field like a soldier reporting for duty, and the change in him was so total that she heard somewhere down the line a low, involuntary sound from one of the men, the sound of somebody's certainty cracking. Doyle heard it too. His smile stayed put, but something behind his eyes recalculated. Tracking first, he said. The first of his specialists stepped forward with a scent article and laid the course, and Atlas ran it flawlessly. Nose down, methodical, exactly the way a 3-year combat veteran runs a track, because that's what he was and always had been under everything they'd done to him. He found the mark. He indicated clean. He sat and waited for the next command like the professional Olivia had built him into before the world went dark. A murmur again through the platoon. Different this time. Doyle made a note on his clipboard. Obedience, he said, handler 2. This was where it was supposed to start going wrong. The second specialist stepped, in a stranger, a hand Atlas had never known, exactly the kind of unknown human that had made him snap for 2 years. Olivia's whole body went tight. This was the moment. If the fear surfaced anywhere, it surfaced here, with a strange hand giving commands and a strange voice pitched wrong. The specialist barked a command, fast, hard, deliberately hard. Olivia caught it, the tiny edge of aggression laced into the tone, the thing designed to spike a fear-trained dog into a reaction. Atlas's ears twitched, his feet shifted, and down the line, without moving her lips, Olivia breathed the thing she'd spent 6 hours teaching him. Not a command, just presence. Just the low, steady frequency of the one safe thing in his world, close enough that he'd feel it even if no one else could hear it. Easy. Atlas's feet settled. He looked once, just once, across the field and found her at the line, and then he turned back to the stranger and executed the command. Cleanly, precisely. Every command the specialist threw harder and faster and edged with that manufactured aggression Atlas took, because every time the fear started to rise, he found her at the edge of the field and remembered that he was not alone. The specialist tried harder. Olivia watched him try, watched him deliberately fumble a command, give a contradictory one, crowd the dog's space in a way no real handler ever would, trying to break him, trying to earn the reaction the paperwork needed. And Atlas held. Doyle wasn't smiling anymore. Threat response, he said, and there was an edge in his voice now that hadn't been there before. This was the part that mattered. Everyone on that field knew it, even the ones who didn't understand dogs. The engagement and the recall. The command every dog in Doyle's program had failed. The command that when it failed here would end with a needle and a signature and a good soldier erased for the second and final time. Ryan stepped forward to take the lead. Olivia watched him cross the field, watched the man who'd been ready to write her off on day one walk into the exact center of Doyle's trap with his spine straight and his face calm, and she felt her heart climb into her throat. Everything came down to the next 90 seconds. Everything she'd crossed a country for. Everything Atlas had survived. Everything Ryan had put on the line by choosing to stand beside her. Ryan reached down and took the lead from the specialist's hand. And Atlas turned and looked up at him, and Olivia saw the dog make a decision, saw him look at this new human whose hand was on his lead, and remember 6 hours of patient work and decide that this one too was safe. The dog leaned just slightly into Ryan's leg. Ryan's throat moved. He put one careful hand on the scarred back. "Good boy," he said so low only the dog could hear it. "Good boy, we've got this." "Set the decoy," Doyle ordered. One of his specialists pulled on a bite suit and moved into position downfield. The target, the threat, the thing, the dog would be sent to engage. Standard protocol, except Olivia was watching the man's body language, and she saw it. The thing Doyle was counting on, this decoy wasn't going to play it straight. He was going to fight dirty inside the suit, thrash wrong, hit pressure points, drive the dog past the edge of control, turn a clean engagement into a frenzy that no recall could pull back. They weren't testing whether Atlas could recall. They were engineering a dog that couldn't be recalled and then blaming the dog for it. Olivia's blood ran cold. She almost broke the line right there. But she caught Ryan's eye across the field, one flick. One heartbeat of contact, and she saw that he'd read it too. He gave her the smallest possible nod. "I see it. I've got it." "On your command, Master Chief," Doyle said pleasantly. Ryan looked down at Tom, then out at the decoy, then for the briefest instant at Olivia. "Atlas," he said, using the real name deliberately, letting it carry and letting 40 men hear the name Doyle had tried to erase. "Send." He released the lead. Atlas exploded downfield, 90 pounds of muscle and purpose. And this time it wasn't the blind panic of a cornered animal. It was the clean, controlled drive of a working dog doing exactly what he'd been built to do before anyone broke him. He closed on the decoy in a heartbeat and hit the bite suit with textbook precision, driving into the padded forearm locking on, and Olivia felt the whole platoon inhale as one. And then the decoy started to fight dirty, just like she'd known he would. He wrenched his arm in a way no real threat ever would, twisting to torque the dog's neck, driving a knee up toward Atlas's ribs, shouting deliberately cruelly loud right into the dog's face. Every single thing a fear-trained dog was conditioned to interpret as a life-or-death escalation. Every single trigger they'd built into him over 2 years fired all at once at point-blank range. It was designed to make him lose his mind. And for one terrible second, it worked. Olivia saw it happen, saw the old wiring catch fire, saw Atlas's body language flip from working to surviving, saw the frenzy start to take him the way it had taken every broken dog in that program. His grip clamped down harder. A sound tore out of him that wasn't a working dog's sound. His eyes went bead and white and gone. "There it is," Doyle said quietly, and there was satisfaction in it, and he lifted his hand toward the 2 men waiting at the edge of the field with the equipment that ended things. "Master Chief, recall your animal." Ryan opened his mouth to give the recall, and Doyle cut across him smooth as silk, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Belay that. Let's see if it comes off for the handler, shall we not, the woman it's imprinted on. Master Chief Walker, you have the lead. Recall the animal." There it was, the final turn. Doyle had never intended to let Olivia call the recall. He'd said the release was Ryan's, and now he was pinning the recall on Ryan too, forcing the impossible command onto the one man who couldn't give it, so that when the dog didn't come off, it would be Walker's failure, Walker's name, Walker's hand that killed him. Ryan didn't hesitate. Atlas out. The dog didn't come off. He couldn't. He was gone, lost in the frenzy. The decoy had manufactured 90 pounds of terror clamped onto a padded arm with a man screaming in his face, and no command in the world could reach a dog that far past the edge. Ryan called it again harder. Atlas out. And the dog didn't so much as flick an ear, and a low murmur of dread went through the platoon, and Doyle's hand rose higher, signaling his men forward, and Olivia saw the whole trap close in a single sickening instant. They were going to do it. Right here. Right now. In front of everyone. And Ryan's voice hoarse now, cracking. Atlas out. Nothing. Doyle's men were moving. Olivia Carter broke the line. She didn't run. Running would spike him worse. She walked fast, straight, unhurried, in the way that only years of doing exactly this under fire could teach a person to be unhurried. Straight into the middle of a field, she'd been ordered to stay off straight toward a dog in full frenzy, and Doyle wheeled on her with the first real crack in his composure she'd seen. Captain, get back to the... She didn't stop. She didn't even look at him. Atlas! She didn't shout it. That was the thing nobody understood. The thing they'd never understood in 2 years of trying to build a dog you could command by force. You don't outscream a dog's terror. You give him something stronger than the fear to come home to. And she pitched it low and steady and absolutely certain the voice she'd used on him across 3 years, in 2 deployments, in 100 worse moments than this one. The voice that had been the last safe thing in his world before the world went dark. Atlas, with me. The dog's ear flicked. The whole field went dead silent. That's it, she breathed, still walking, still steady, closing the distance now. That's it. I've got you. You're not there anymore. You're here. You're with me. Out. And Atlas, 90 pounds of frenzy past every edge, lost in 2 years of manufactured terror, heard the one voice in the universe that had never once hurt him and let go. He released the bite. He turned. And he crossed the field to her at a dead run and planted himself at her side, shaking, pressing his whole scarred weight into her leg, and looked up at her with eyes that had come all the way back from wherever the decoy had sent him. And Olivia Carter dropped one hand to his head and stood in the middle of that field with her partner at her side and 40 SEALs staring in absolute ringing silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And then somewhere down the line, one man started to clap. It was Reyes. He clapped once slow and then again, and then the man beside him joined, and then it caught and rolled down the whole line like a wave until 40 operators were on their feet making a noise that had nothing to do with an evaluation and everything to do with having just watched something true. Doyle's face had gone white. That doesn't count. His voice cut across the applause, sharp now, the Polish gone. That does not count. The recall was assigned to the handler. The animal failed the handler recall. It only responded to the captain, which proves the exact liability I documented. It's imprinted on one person and uncontrollable for anyone else. That's a failure. That's a textbook of failure. He was gripping the clipboard hard enough to whiten his knuckles. The animal is unreliable and the termination stands. The applause died, and Olivia turned to face him, one hand still resting on Atlas's head, and she spoke not loud but clear enough that every man on that field heard every word. Say that again, Commander. The animal only responds to you. That's a liability, not a... No. Her voice cut clean through his. You said it responds to one person. You said it took every command from your 2 handlers. Strangers, men it had never met. Men who deliberately fumbled and crowded and edged their commands to try and break it. And it took all of it cleanly in front of 40 witnesses. It tracked. It obeyed. It engaged on the Master Chief's release. She took a step toward him. Every single portion of your evaluation it had passed. For handlers, it didn't know. The only thing it did that you're calling a failure, Commander, is that when a dog passed the edge of a manufactured frenzy, a frenzy your man engineered, and don't think these 40 men didn't watch him do it, when that dog needed one voice to come home to it, came home to the person who never heard it. The field was silent. You want to call that a defect? Olivia said, and her voice dropped, and it shook now, not with fear, with something far more dangerous. You've been calling it a defect for 2 years. You built a whole program on the idea that the bond is a weakness, that loyalty is a flaw you can engineer out, that a dog is just a weapon, and the thing that makes it love its handler is inefficient and slow and disposable. She was close now, and you flew across a country to put this dog down before it could stand on a field like this one and prove you wrong, in front of witnesses, because that's the one thing you can't have. Not a dead dog, you've got plenty of those. Witnesses. Doyle's jaw worked. You have no idea what you're... His name was Atlas. Olivia's voice rose now, and it carried, and she was not talking to Doyle anymore. She was talking to 40 men. He served 3 years, 2 deployments. He pulled wounded soldiers out of an ambush under fire. I was there, I saw him do it, and when his handler was off the grid and couldn't protect him, this man, she didn't point, she didn't have to, signed an order that took him, erased his record, and handed him to a contractor that spent 2 years trying to burn the loyalty out of him because loyalty was inconvenient. And when Atlas wouldn't break, when he refused through everything they did to him to stop looking for the person he trusted, they marked him a failure and threw him away to die. A sound moved through the platoon, low, dangerous. The sound of 40 men who lived and died by the word loyalty, understanding all at once exactly what they'd been asked to watch. He's not the only one, Olivia said, and this was the twist she'd been holding, and she let it land. There are others, dozens. Working dogs taken from handlers who couldn't fight back, some of them reassigned out of the way right before their partners were harvested, so nobody would be around to ask where the dogs went. This isn't a rehabilitation program, gentlemen. It's a machine for stealing soldiers and grinding them up, and the man standing in front of you built it. She turned back to Doyle, and her voice went very quiet. Didn't you, Commander? Doyle should have denied it. That was the thing that broke him in the end, that he was so used to winning, so certain of the authority he wore, so unable to imagine losing in front of a room full of people who didn't matter to him, that when Olivia laid it all bare, he didn't reach for a denial. He reached for a threat. You are standing on very dangerous ground, Captain, he said, low and cold, the mask fully off now. The programs you're talking about are classified above anything your little clearance has ever touched. The men who authorize them are not people you cross. You think 40 SEALs clapping for a dog protects you. You think a Master Chief who threw his career away vouching for you protects you. His lip curled. I have signed orders that made better soldiers than you disappear. That dog was scheduled for termination, and it will be terminated, and you'll be reassigned so far off the grid, your own mother won't be able to find you, and every man on this field who's stupid enough to remember today will learn to forget it. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. The silence that followed was total, and into it a voice flat, hard, 20 years of command behind it. Say that again. Ryan Walker had crossed the field. He was standing now between Doyle and Olivia, and his face was something Olivia had not seen on him before, and she understood suddenly why men followed this man into places they shouldn't have walked out of. You just told me, Ryan said very quietly, in front of my entire platoon that you signed orders to make soldiers disappear, that you're going to reassign an officer to bury her, that you're going to terminate a service animal specifically to destroy evidence, and that you expect my men to forget they heard it. He took a step closer. Did I get that right, Commander? Doyle's eyes flicked to the platoon, and for the first time Olivia saw him register the room. Really register it. 40 operators, 40 faces that had gone from neutral to something else entirely. 40 men who had just watched a broken dog come home to one voice and then heard the man in front of them threaten to erase everyone who'd witnessed it. You're all under, Doyle started. We're all under nothing, Reyes said, stepping off the line. We're witnesses, 40 of us. To an evaluation, you rigged a dog that passed it and a commander who just confessed to a crime because he couldn't imagine a room full of people wouldn't roll over for him. He crossed his arms. You picked the wrong platoon, sir. Doyle's mouth opened, closed. And Olivia Carter watched the exact moment a man who had won for 20 years understood that he had finally lost, and understood worse that he'd lost in the one way that couldn't be filed away or blacked out or made to disappear. Not on paper, in front of witnesses, in the memory of 40 men who would never ever forget. This isn't over, Doyle said, But his voice had changed. The certainty was gone out of it. It was the voice of a man reaching for authority and finding for the first time in his career that it wasn't there. No, Olivia agreed. Her hand rested on Atlas's head, and the dog stood steady and calm and unafraid beside her, and she looked at the man who'd taken him and felt something that was almost pity and nowhere near mercy. It's not over. It's the opposite of over, Commander. She held his gaze. It's just starting, and you brought all your witnesses to the wrong field. Doyle looked at her. He looked at Ryan. He looked at 40 SEALs who were no longer neutral, who would carry what they'd seen off this field and into every conversation they ever had, into sworn statements and chains of command, and every quiet channel that even a man like Doyle couldn't fully control. And then Commander Elias Doyle turned and walked off the field, and his two blank-faced specialists gathered their equipment in silence and followed, and the termination order that had hung over Atlas's head for 3 days went with them. Unsigned, unenforceable dead on arrival in the face of the one thing Doyle had never planned for. The truth witnessed. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Reyes crossed the field, and he crouched down in front of Atlas, slow, careful the way Olivia had taught them all without ever saying a word, and he held out one hand palm down and let the dog choose. Atlas leaned forward and pressed his nose into the man's palm. Reyes let out a breath that shook. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Yeah, okay. Okay, buddy." He looked up at Olivia, and there was something raw in his face. "I was at Barnes's bedside. I wanted to put this dog down myself." He swallowed. "I didn't know. None of us knew what they did to him. He stopped, shook his head. "I'm sorry for what it's worth. I'm sorry." "You didn't know," Olivia said. "That's the whole thing they were counting on, Chief. Nobody knew. That's how it worked." She looked around the field at 40 men who now knew. "It doesn't work anymore." Ryan came to stand beside her. He looked down at the bomb and then out at the direction Doyle had gone, and his jaw was set. "He'll come back at us," Ryan said quietly. "Men like that don't just walk away. He'll come back with lawyers and clearances and every dirty channel he's got. What we did today, it's not a victory, Carter. It's a declaration of war." "I know," Olivia said. "There are dozens of those dogs still out there. Dozens of handlers who don't know what happened to their partners. And a whole program with people above Doyle who've got a lot more to lose than he does." Ryan looked at her. "You understand what it's going to take to drag all of that into the light. You understand it doesn't end on this field." "I've understood that since the first night," Olivia said. She looked down at Atlas, at the partner she'd crossed a country for, who stood now at her side, unbroken and unafraid, his real name spoken aloud in front of 40 men who would carry it. This was never about one dog, Ryan. It was always about all of them. She raised her eyes to his. "The question is whether you're still in. Because today was the easy part. Today we had witnesses and a rigged evil and a man dumb enough to confess. Tomorrow we go after the ones who aren't dumb, the ones who covered their tracks, the ones with real power." Ryan Walker looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his platoon 40 operators who had just discovered that everything they believed about loyalty had been quietly betrayed by someone with a signature and a clearance, and who were looking now, every one of them, not at Doyle's retreating back, but at the woman standing in the middle of the field with an unbroken dog at her side. "Carter," he said, "I've got 40 men who just watched what loyalty actually looks like, and every one of them is going to want in when they understand how many others are still out there." He held out his hand the same way he had 3 nights ago in the fading light when he'd first chosen to stand beside her. "I'm in. We're all in. Now let's go find the rest of them." Olivia Carter took his hand, and down at her side, Atlas lifted his great scarred head, looked out across the field where he'd been sent to D and had instead been given back his name, and stood steady, calm, and finally, after 2 years unafraid, the soldier they tried to erase and couldn't, waiting at the side of the one person who'd never stopped looking for him, ready for whatever came next. Doyle came back inside 48 hours, and he came back exactly the way Ryan said he would. Not in person. Men like Doyle didn't fight their own fights once the field went against them. He came back as a phone call to the base commander, as a formal complaint routed through channels Olivia couldn't see, as a sudden flurry of paperwork that landed on Ryan's desk, with the unmistakable smell of a man reaching for the levers he'd always been able to pull. Ryan read the first document standing up, and by the time he finished, his knuckles were white around the edge of the page. They're relieving me of the platoon, he said. Olivia looked up sharply. What? Pending review. Conduct unbecoming. Allowing an unauthorized evaluation undermining a superior officer's lawful determination, creating a hostile command environment. He set the paper down slowly. It's Doyle. Every word of it's Doyle. He can't come at us on the dog anymore. Too many witnesses. So he's coming at the chain of command instead. Peel me off the platoon and there's nobody with rank standing between you and reassignment. He's splitting us. Olivia stood. Same play as the field. Separate the two people who can hurt him and pick them off one at a time. It's a good play, Ryan admitted, and there was something grim in his voice. It worked on him for 20 years. You don't build a machine like his without knowing how to make people disappear one at a time. He looked at her. The 40 men who watched that field, they're witnesses to what happened there. But a review board doesn't care about a dog. It cares about whether a master chief overstepped. And on paper, Carter, he shook his head. On paper, I did. Olivia was quiet a moment. Then she said, so we get off paper. Meaning Doyle's whole power lives in the world of files and clearances and reviews because that's the world he controls. Every time we let him drag it there, he wins because he owns the terrain. She was pacing now, fast the operator's mind she'd tried to leave behind, turning over hard. We beat him on the field because we made it about something a review board can't touch. 40 men saw the truth with their own eyes. We need to do that again, but bigger. We need to make this so public, so witnessed that no signature can bury it. She stopped. We need the handlers. Ryan frowned. What handlers? The other ones. Danny said it dozens of dogs taken from handlers who couldn't fight back. Some of those handlers are still out there, Ryan. Still serving. Still wondering what happened to a partner that vanished into a black bar. Her eyes sharpened. Doyle can make one officer disappear. He can maybe make two disappear. He cannot make disappear a dozen decorated veterans standing up together saying the same thing at the same time. That's not a loose end anymore. That's a wall. You want to find them. Ryan said it slowly. The other handlers. I want to find every single one, Olivia said, and I want to give them back what he took. It started with Danny Vega. She called him that night, and this time she didn't have to convince him. Something had shifted in the 2 days since they had last spoken. She could hear it in his voice the second he picked up. I heard what happened, Vega said. On the field, Doyle in front of the whole platoon. A pause. That was you. That was Atlas, Olivia said. I just stood on the field. He did the rest. Carter, Vega's voice was rough. You put him in a corner in front of 40 witnesses. Do you have any idea how long I've watched that man walk between the raindrops? He's untouchable. He's been untouchable. And you got him to confess in front of a SEAL platoon. He exhaled. I've been sitting on what I know for 2 years because I told myself there was nothing to be done, that the machine was too big, that the people running it were too high up. A beat. I don't get to tell myself that anymore, do I? No, Olivia said quietly. You don't, and neither do I. What do you need? Name's Danny, the handlers, the ones whose dogs got taken. You saw the paperwork move on Atlas. You saw it move on the others too. I know you did. She gripped the phone. Give me the names and I'll do the rest. The silence stretched. You understand what I'm handing you, Vega said finally. The second I give you those names, I'm not a bystander anymore. I'm a co-conspirator in whatever you're about to do. Doyle finds out it was me, my career's over. Maybe worse. I know. And you're asking anyway. I'm asking anyway, Olivia said, because there are a dozen soldiers out there right now who think their partner washed out or died or just vanished, and every one of them is carrying a grief they don't even understand for a betrayal they don't know happened. You've got the names that could give them the truth, Danny. I can't make you hand them over. Her voice dropped. But I don't think you called me back tonight to say no. Another silence, longer, and then Danny Vega said, get a pen. There were 14 names, 14 handlers scattered across 4 branches and half a dozen bases, every one of them attached to a working dog that had been quietly transferred into Doyle's contractor between 3 and 5 years ago. 14 partnerships broken with a signature. 14 soldiers who had in the official record simply lost a dog to reassignment or retirement or the vague administrative fog that swallowed inconvenient things. Olivia spread the list across Ryan's desk, and the two of them looked at it in silence for a long time. 14, Ryan said finally. That Danny knows about. There are more, but 14 we can find. 14 we can reach. And you want to what? Call them up. Cold. Hi, you don't know me, but the dog you lost was stolen and tortured by a classified program, and I'd like you to help me bring it down. Ryan shook his head. Half of them will hang up. The other half will report the call to exactly the wrong person, and Doyle will know we're coming before we've reached the third name. Then we don't call cold. Olivia tapped the first name on the list. We start with the one most likely to believe us, the one who already suspects. How do you know any of them suspects? Because I suspected. She looked at him. For 2 years, something didn't sit right. I didn't have proof, I didn't have a thread to push, but I knew. In my gut, I knew the story I'd been told about Atlas was wrong. A good handler always knows. Her finger moved down the list, slow reading the names like she was reading faces. At least one of these 14 has been lying awake at night, knowing the same thing about their dog. We find that one first. We give them the proof, and then we don't have one voice anymore. She looked up. We have two.
Kastan.
The one who already suspected was named Sergeant Maria Flores, and she didn't hang up. She went silent, instead a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line, the silence of a person hearing out loud a thing they'd spent years refusing to let themselves believe. And when she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. Say his name again. Ranger, Olivia said gently. She had the file in front of her, Danny's file, the one that matched the dog to the handler. German Shepherd. You had him 3 years. His transfer paperwork says he was retired for hip dysplasia, and he didn't have hip dysplasia. Flora's voice cracked clean in half. He was the healthiest dog on the base. I fought them on that retirement. I fought them. They told me I was too attached, that I couldn't see clearly that the vet's assessment was final. They made me feel like I was crazy. A ragged breath. I've spent 2 years thinking I was the problem. That I couldn't let go, that I imagined he was fine because I couldn't stand to lose him. You weren't the problem, Olivia said. You were right. You were right the whole time, Sergeant. They took him and they made you doubt yourself so you wouldn't ask questions. The sound that came down the line then wasn't quite a and wasn't quite a laugh. It was the sound of 2 years of self-doubt collapsing all at once and grief and rage rushing in to fill the space it left. Where is he? Flora said. Where's my dog? And this was the moment Olivia had dreaded because she'd known it would come with every name on the list, and she'd known she couldn't lie. I don't know yet, she said quietly. Some of the dogs washed out and got dumped on bases like mine. That's how I found Atlas. Some got transferred deeper into the program, and some, she stopped, made herself say it. Some didn't make it, Maria. I'm not getting to promise you Rangers alive because I don't know, and you deserve better than a promise I can't keep. What I can tell you is that right now, nobody's even looking. The record says he was retired, and that's the end of it. Nobody is looking for your dog. Her voice steadied. I'm asking you to help me change that, for Ranger if he's out there, and for the others who might still be. The silence this time was different. It had a spine in it. What do you need me to do? Sergeant Maria Flores said. 2 became 4, 4 became 7. Not all of them said yes. 2 of the 14 had made their peace, or thought they had, and didn't want the wound reopened, and Olivia let them go without pushing, because she understood that grief was its own kind of loyalty, and some people survived it by refusing to look back. 3 she couldn't reach at all. 1 she was fairly sure reported the call because 2 days later, a new piece of paper landed on Ryan's desk, and the review of his conduct suddenly grew teeth. But 7 said yes. 7 decorated soldiers scattered across the country, who had each spent years carrying a private grief and a private doubt, and who each, the moment they understood they hadn't been crazy, that their partner really had been taken, that the doubt they'd been made to swallow was a lie, engineered on purpose, turned that grief into something with a much harder edge. Olivia gathered them the only way she could over encrypted calls and careful channels, 7 voices in 7 places, and she laid out what she had. Danny's names, the transfer records that didn't add up, the contractor with no branch and no oversight, Atlas alive, standing proof of what the program did to the dogs it couldn't break. Here's what I know, she told them all, 7 at once, Late on a night that Ryan spent standing guard at the door of the office like the whole thing might come apart if he stepped away. One officer they can bury, two maybe, but eight of us, eight decorated handlers standing up together with records and dates and a living animal to prove it. That's not something a signature can make disappear. Alone, every one of us is a loose end. Together, we're a wall Doyle can't get around. He'll try, one of the handlers said. A weathered voice, a man named Cole, who'd lost a Malinois named Duke 4 years back. Men like that always try. Let him try, Olivia said. The more he reaches, the more people see him reaching. We beat him on that field because we made it public and we made it witnessed. That's the play scaled up. We don't fight him in the dark where he's strong. We drag every piece of this into the daylight all at once with 8 names on it instead of 1. She paused. But I need to be straight with all of you because you've been lied to enough. This is dangerous. Some of these people are far above Doyle and they've got more to lose than he does, and they will come at your careers, your reputations, maybe more. If any of you wants out, now's the time and nobody will think less of you. Silence on the line. 7 breaths in 7 places. And then Maria Flores said quiet and steady. They made me doubt myself for 2 years. They made me think I was crazy for loving my dog. A beat. I'm not scared of them anymore. I'm just done. One by one, the others said it too. Different words, same spine. 8 handlers. 1 wall. Olivia Carter sat in the dark with the phone in her hand and felt for the first time since she'd walked onto Coronado that she wasn't fighting this alone. Doyle felt the wall forming before he could see it, and it made him reckless. Ryan got the warning from an old friend, 2 ranks up, a quiet call off the record. Ryan, whatever you've got yourself into, get out of it. There's a man throwing his weight around at levels you can't see, and he's got your name at the top of a list. They're not just going to relieve you. They're building something to end you. Conduct insubordination, and there's talk of pulling your pension review forward. A pause. I've known you 20 years. I'm telling you as a friend. Walk away. Ryan thanked him and hung up, and told Olivia none of it at first until she read it on his face, because by now she could read his face the way she read a dog's, and she made him say it. He's coming for your pension, she said flatly when he finished. 20 years and he's going to take it to punish you for standing on a field. He can try. Ryan, she stopped. This isn't your fight. It was never your fight. It was mine, my dog, my program, my mess. You could still walk away. Give the board what they want, distance yourself from me, keep your 20 years. Nobody would blame you. I wouldn't blame you. Ryan looked at her for a long moment. You know what I keep thinking about, he said. Barnes, my guy 20 stitches put in the infirmary by a dog. Everybody told me was a monster. I signed off on the incident report myself. I wrote the words aggressive and unreliable. I helped build the file that almost got Atlas killed. He shook his head slowly. I did that. Not Doyle, me, because I looked at a hurt soldier and saw a weapon that malfunctioned, and I never once asked what happened to him. I never asked why. I just wrote it down and moved on, and if you hadn't shown up, that dog would be dead, and I'd have signed the paper and slept fine that night. You didn't know. That's exactly it, Carter. I didn't know, and I didn't ask, and a soldier almost died for it. His jaw set. You asked me on that field if I was still in. I'm not in because it's my fight. I'm in because for 20 years I taught young men that we don't leave people behind. And then I found out I'd been leaving people behind the whole time without even knowing it. Dogs who bled for us. Soldiers who couldn't file a complaint. He met her eyes. So no, I'm not walking away to save my pension. If I do that, then everything I ever told those men was a lie, and I'd rather lose the 20 years than live as the man who knew and looked away. A grim ghost of a smile. Besides, I've got 40 operators who'd never let me hear the end of it. Olivia looked at him, really looked the way she had that first day, except everything she'd been so wrong about had turned inside out. And she understood that somewhere in the last week, she'd stopped fighting this alone in a way that went deeper than the 7 handlers on the phone. Okay, she said quietly. Then we finish it together. They chose the moment carefully. Not a review board Doyle's terrain, not a quiet channel where a signature could bury it. They chose the one place where 8 witness voices and a living dog and a paper trail could all land at once in front of people Doyle couldn't reach and couldn't silence an oversight hearing formal on the record with the kind of attendance that meant it couldn't simply vanish. It took 2 weeks to arrange, and every day of those 2 weeks, Doyle pressed harder. Another document, another threat routed through another channel, the review of Ryan's conduct grinding forward, the reassignment paperwork for Olivia, moving up a desk at a time. He was trying to end them both before the hearing could happen. It was a race now, and everybody in it knew it. 3 days out, he almost won. Olivia's reassignment came through. Effective immediately. Orders cut transport, arranged a posting so remote and so classified that once she boarded, she'd be gone off the grid, unreachable, unable to testify exactly the way Danny had warned her. 2 years of history could vanish behind a black bar. She stood in Ryan's office with the orders in her hand and felt the trap close. 3 days, she said. Her voice was very steady, which was how Ryan knew how frightened she was. The hearing's in 3 days, and these orders are effective now. He timed it perfect. I board that transport, I'm gone before I can say a word. Then you don't board it. It's a lawful order, Ryan. I refuse it. I'm AWOL, and then I'm not a whistleblower anymore. I'm a deserter, and everything I say gets thrown out with me. She set the paper down. He built it clean. Same as the eval. He always builds it clean. Ryan was quiet. Then he picked up the orders and read them slowly the way she'd seen him read the very first document 2 weeks ago. These are signed by Doyle, he said. Of course they are. Doyle's under review himself now. Formal complaint, 8 handlers filed as of this morning. I made sure it got filed this morning specifically. He looked up, and there was the ghost of that grim smile again. An officer under formal review for abuse of authority doesn't have clean authority to cut reassignment orders that conveniently remove a witness against him. That's not a lawful order, Carter. That's tampering. And I've got a friend 2 ranks up who owes me 20 years of favors and just found his spine. He reached for the phone. You're not going anywhere except a hearing in 3 days. Olivia looked at him. You realize, she said slowly, that the second you make that call, you've burned the last bridge. There's no walking it back after this. No quiet retirement. No saving the pension. You make that call and you're all the way in the fire with me. Ryan Walker held her gaze and he picked up the phone and he dialed. Carter, he said while it rang. I've been all the way in the fire since the day I watched that dog lay his head in your lap. The line connected. He put it to his ear. I just took a while to admit it. The 3 days before the hearing were the longest of Olivia's life, and Atlas felt every hour of it. That was the thing about a dog like him. He read her the way she read him, and he knew in whatever way dogs know that something enormous was bearing down. He stayed close, closer than usual. He'd taken to sleeping across the door of her quarters, and when she paced at night, he paced with her, and when she finally sat down on the floor at 3 in.the.morning, unable to sleep, he came and put his whole scarred weight against her, and stayed there breathing slow and steady, the way he'd steadied her 100 times, downrange before the world went dark. We're going to walk into a room full of people who can end everything, she told him low in the dark, her hand moving through the fur at his neck. And I'm going to stand up and tell them what they did to you, all of it, in front of everyone. Her voice caught. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if they'll believe 8 of us over him. I don't know if we're going to find the others or if any of them are still. She stopped. I don't know how this ends, Atlas. The dog turned his head and pressed his nose against her jaw. And Olivia Carter, who had held it together through 2 years of grief and 2 weeks of war, finally let herself cry quietly in the dark with her arms around the partner she'd crossed a country to find the one thing in all of it she'd refused to lose. But I found you, she whispered into his fur. Whatever else happens, I found you and they don't get to take you again. And 8 soldiers are standing up because you wouldn't break. She pulled back and looked him in the eyes the way she had on the field, the way she had that first morning at the fence. You did that. You refused to stop being who you are, and it's about to bring down the whole thing. You know that, you beautiful, stubborn animal. You're about to win a war they've been getting away with for years, and all you ever did was refuse to stop looking for me. Atlas thumped his tail once against the floor. And in the morning, Olivia Carter stood up and washed her face and put on her uniform and walked out to meet Ryan Walker and 8 handlers in a hearing that would decide everything with her partner at her side, steady and unafraid the soldier they tried to erase, walking into the room where the erasing would finally stop. The hearing room was fuller than Doyle had wanted it, and Olivia saw that register on his face the moment she walked in. He'd expected a small proceeding, something manageable, something with the right people in the right chairs, quiet enough to steer, controlled enough to bury. Instead, there were faces he didn't recognize and couldn't reach oversight officials, a legal officer taking record, and along one wall standing at parade rest because they'd asked to be there and wouldn't be told no, a delegation from Ryan's platoon led by Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reyes. 40 men couldn't fit in the room, so they'd sent 8, and the 8 they'd sent had the look of men who'd walk through a wall if anyone tried to make them leave. And beside Olivia, calm and steady on a lead, she held loose the way she'd taught Ryan to hold it, stood Atlas. Doyle's eyes found the dog, and something crossed his face, not fear exactly, but the flat displeasure of a man watching a variable he'd thought he'd eliminated walk into the room on 4 legs. Captain Carter. He recovered fast. She'd give him that. I wasn't aware you'd be bringing the animal. He's not an animal in this room, Commander, Olivia said evenly. He's evidence. The legal officer looked up. Explain that, Captain. I intend to. Olivia stepped forward. That's why I'm here. So, she'd rehearsed it 100 times, and she threw the rehearsal away the moment she started talking, because rehearsed words sounded like rehearsed words, and what this room needed was the truth said plainly. So she told them plainly. She told them about a dog named Atlas who'd served 3 years and 2 deployments and pulled 4 wounded men out of an ambush under fire. She told them about the mission that went dark and the black bar in the record and how a partner she'd raised from a pup had vanished off her file the day everything fell apart. She told them about the contractor with no branch and no oversight and the program built on a single idea that the bond between a handler and a dog was inefficient, that loyalty was a delay you could engineer out, that you could manufacture obedience out of fear if you were willing to break something to do it. She told them about the 2 years Atlas spent being broken, about the drills meant to burn her out of him, about how he'd refused, how he'd fought it, kept looking, wouldn't take the conditioning clean, and how they'd marked that refusal a defect and thrown him away to die on a base full of strangers as an unstable, unreliable weapon. He didn't malfunction, Olivia said. He survived. There's a difference, and this program was built by people who never understood it. Then she named Doyle. She laid the transfer order on the table, his signature, the date, the paper that had taken her partner. And she watched the man's face, and she watched him understand that she wasn't guessing anymore. Commander Doyle signed the order that took Atlas, she said, and when I found him alive, when I proved on a training field in front of 40 witnesses that the dog he'd condemned could still track, obey, engage, and recall, Commander Doyle flew across the country to personally ensure the animal was terminated before it could be examined, before anyone could look at what 2 years in that program had done to it. She turned to the oversight officials. You don't fly across a country to put down one washed-out dog. You do it to destroy evidence. And I'd ask this room to consider what kind of evidence a man has to be that afraid of. Doyle stood and the mask came off and Olivia braced for the threat. This is a deeply emotional presentation, he said, and his voice was smooth again, the field confession, forgotten the polish back in place. And I understand why. Captain Carter lost a partner. Grief makes people see patterns that aren't there. But let's be clear about what's actually in front of this hearing. An unstable animal with a documented history of injuring handlers, a specialist with an incomplete record and a personal obsession, and a chain of unauthorized actions culminating in an evaluation she had no authority to conduct. He spread his hands. There is no program, there is no conspiracy, there is a grieving officer who couldn't accept that her dog washed out and a master chief who let sentiment override his judgment. That's the whole story, and it's a sad one, but it is not a crime. It was good. Olivia had to admit it was good. If it had been just her one grieving officer, one incomplete file, one dog, it might have worked. Doyle had spent 20 years making exactly this argument work, but it wasn't just her. Then you won't mind hearing from the others, Olivia said. Doyle's head turned. What others? And the door opened. Soon, Sergeant Maria Flores came in first in dress uniform, spine straight, and she did not look at Doyle. She looked at the oversight officials and she said, My name is Sergeant Maria Flores. 3 years ago, they took my partner, a German shepherd named Ranger. They told me he was retired for a medical condition he didn't have. They told me I was too attached to see clearly. They made me believe for 2 years that I was the problem. Her voice didn't shake. She'd done her shaking already on a phone call weeks ago, and there was nothing left now but steel. I wasn't the problem. His transfer paperwork routes to the same contractor. It carries the same signature. She set a page on the table beside Olivia's. Commander Doyle's. Then Cole came in, weathered and grim, and put down a page about a Malinois named Duke. Then the next, and the next. One by one, 7 decorated handlers walked into that room and laid down 7 pieces of paper. 7 partners taken. 7 signatures that all trace back to the same man. And Olivia watched Doyle's face as the wall she'd promised the room built itself in front of him, page by page, voice by voice, until it wasn't one grieving officer he could dismiss with a sad smile. It was 8. It was a pattern no amount of polish could argue into coincidence. It was exactly the one thing Danny Vega had told her 2 years too late and right on time that a man like Doyle could not survive. Witnesses, together, all saying the same thing at the same time. This is Doyle started, and for the first time his voice wasn't smooth. These records are classified. Every person in this room is now in violation of these records, the legal officer said quietly, not looking up from the papers, are evidence in a proceeding that will be examining who classified them and why, and whether that classification was used to conceal misconduct. He finally raised his eyes to Doyle. Sit down, Commander. Doyle did not sit down. Olivia watched him stand there, watched 20 years of untouchable authority crack in real time, watched a man who had made better soldiers than her disappear, discover that he had finally reached across a table at people who would not disappear. And she felt no triumph. She'd expected triumph, and there wasn't any. There was just the flat, clean weight of the truth finally being heavier than the lie. It was Ryan who delivered the last piece, and he did it quietly. He stood and he identified himself, 20 years of service, in the way he held himself. And he said, I want to enter something into the record, and I want to be clear that it's not in my favor. The room stilled. 6 weeks ago, I signed an incident report on the animal in question, Ryan said. I wrote the words aggressive and unreliable. I helped build the file that recommended his termination. I did that without asking a single question about why a decorated working dog was behaving the way he was. I looked at a wounded soldier and I saw a broken weapon, and I signed the paper and I moved on. He let that sit. I'm a master chief, 20 years. I've spent every one of them teaching young men that we do not leave people behind. And I nearly signed off on the death of a soldier who bled for us because it was easier not to ask. He looked at the oversight officials and then deliberately at his 8 men along the wall. Commander Doyle wants this hearing to believe this is about sentiment, Ryan said. Grief clouding judgment. He's got that exactly backwards. It wasn't sentiment that almost killed this dog. It was the absence of it. It was a whole program built on the idea that you can strip the loyalty out of a soldier and lose nothing. I built a piece of that with my own signature, and I'm here to say into the record that I was wrong, and that the woman standing next to that dog is the only person in this entire chain of command who did her job, which was to look at something everyone else had written off and ask why. He sat down. That's my statement. The silence that followed was the kind that changes a room. And Reyes along the wall uncrossed his arms and said, without being asked, 40 of us watched that dog come back from a manufactured frenzy on one command. 40 of us watched the commander threaten to erase everyone in the room who remembered it. We remember it. He nodded once. We'll all say so, as many times as it takes. Doyle made his last move then, and it was the move of a cornered man, and it was the one that finished him. You have no idea what you're interfering with, he said, and his voice had gone low and cold, and the polish was gone for good now. This program has authorization that runs higher than anyone in this room. The people who built it are not going to let a grieving handler and a washed-up master chief dismantle years of higher than this room, the legal officer repeated. He set down his pen. Commander, you have now stated twice on the record that this program exists, that it has authorization, and that the authorization runs above oversight. A moment ago, you told us there was no program. He folded his hands. You understand you're a witness against yourself at this point. Doyle stopped, and Olivia watched the exact instant the man understood that he'd done it again, that the same thing that had undone him on the field had undone him here, that a man so used to winning he couldn't imagine losing had once more in front of witnesses confessed while reaching for a threat. 20 years of walking between the raindrops, and he'd never learned the one thing every soldier in that room knew in their bones, that when you're certain you can't lose, that's exactly when you stop watching your own mouth. He didn't say anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. The hearing did not end that day with handcuffs. It didn't work like that, and Olivia had never expected it to. What it ended with was worse for Doyle and better for everything she'd fought for: a formal referral, a program pulled into the light and frozen pending full investigation, 8 sworn statements, and 40 more waiting behind them in a paper trail that no signature could bury anymore, because too many people had now seen it with their own eyes. The machine that had run in the dark for years did not survive contact with the daylight. The investigation took months. Olivia had known it would. They found the other dogs, not all of them, and not all of them alive, and there were nights in those months when a name came back with the wrong answer attached, and she sat on the floor with Atlas and grieved for a partner that wasn't hers and a handler she'd only met over a phone line. Ranger Maria Flores' shepherd was found alive in a holding facility, 2 states over, thin and wary and shut down, and Olivia was there the day Flores got him back. And she watched a dog who'd been taught the whole world was a threat hear one voice he remembered and come apart against his handler's chest, and she had to walk outside so nobody would see her face. Duke didn't make it. Cole took that when standing the way old soldiers take things, and then he asked Olivia what he could do to help the ones who were still out there, and she understood that grief had made a soldier of him all over again. Doyle was stripped of command. The people above him, the ones he'd sworn, ran higher than any room, turned out to be a great deal less willing to protect him once he was a liability, instead of an asset, which was the last bitter joke of a man who'd built his whole life on the idea that loyalty was disposable. He'd been right about one thing. It was disposable to the people he'd served. They disposed of him the moment it was convenient. He, of all people, should have seen it coming. Ryan kept his pension. He'd stopped caring about it somewhere around the day he picked up the phone, and maybe that was exactly why he kept it. The board that had been built to end him quietly fell apart. The moment the thing it was meant to bury became the biggest story in 3 commands. He didn't lose the platoon either. 40 men had made it fairly clear they weren't interested in a replacement, and Atlas got his name back. Officially, on paper. The record corrected, the black bar lifted, 3 years of service restored to a file that had tried to erase them. Atlas, not Titan. The name she'd given him when he was small enough to hold in 2 hands entered back into the record where it belonged, permanent, this time past anyone's reach. Months later, Olivia Carter stood on the same training ground where Master Chief Ryan Walker had once kicked a cage bolt loose and hurled her toward a dog he'd been told would tear her apart. She wasn't a transfer nobody trusted anymore. She'd been offered a posting she'd have killed for a year ago somewhere far away and important, and she'd turned it down, and everyone had thought she was crazy until she told them why. Because there were still dogs out there. Because there were still handlers who didn't know. Because a program built to strip the loyalty out of soldiers had run for years, and shutting down one piece of it wasn't the same as making sure it never happened again. And because Olivia Carter had learned something in the 2 years she'd spent looking for one dog and the months she'd spent fighting for a dozen, that the thing she was good at, the thing the black budget programs and the redacted files had trained into her, wasn't fighting. It was refusing to leave people behind. So she stayed. And she built something. A program of her own, a real one, the opposite of Doyle's in every way that mattered for the dogs that came back broken, the ones everybody else wrote off as unreliable, the ones who'd learned the world was a threat and needed one patient person to prove them wrong. She trained the handlers. She trained them the way she'd trained Ryan in 6 impossible hours. Watch the feet, not the teeth. Stay boring, stay safe. Wait for the trust, because you cannot force it, and you cannot fake it, and you cannot skip it, no matter what anyone tells you. And every one of those handlers on their first day met a big scarred Malinois who walked the yard calm and steady at Olivia's side, the dog who'd survived the thing they were all learning to undo, the living proof that broken didn't mean gone. Ryan found her out there on the training ground that afternoon, Atlas dozing in the sun at her feet, and he stood beside her the way he'd learned to, and for a while neither of them said anything. "You know," Ryan said finally, "I spent 20 years thinking I understood strength, what it looked like, who had it." He shook his head slowly. "I thought it was the man who could control the most dangerous thing in the room. First day you showed up, that's what I saw. When I looked at you, somebody trying to prove she could handle something she couldn't. I put you in a pit with a mob I thought would break you because I wanted to watch you learn your limits. I remember, Olivia said. I had it exactly backwards. He looked down at the dog. The strongest person on that field was never the one who could control the animal. It was the one who refused to give up on him when everyone else already had. That's not a thing I taught in 20 years of training operators. It should have been the first thing. He was quiet a moment. You didn't teach a body to trust you, Carter. You reminded a whole platoon what loyalty actually costs. Most of us had forgotten it was supposed to cost us anything. Olivia looked out over the yard at the handlers working with the broken dogs, at the patient slow work of proving to a frightened animal that the world could be safe, and she reached down and put her hand on the head of the partner she'd crossed a country to find and refused through everything to lose. Atlas leaned into her touch the way he had 100 times before the world went dark, and the way he would 1,000 times more. Real strength was never about controlling something powerful. It was about earning the trust of something that had every reason never to trust again, and then never ever betraying it. Doyle had spent his whole career believing loyalty was a weakness you could engineer away, and he'd lost everything to the one dog too loyal to break. Olivia Carter had spent hers believing the exact opposite, and she'd been right on the field, right in the hearing, right on the day she stood at a fence and waited for a broken animal to remember that she'd never once stopped looking for him. She hadn't just saved a military dog. She'd taken the thing they built to destroy loyalty, and she'd turned it into the place loyalty gets rebuilt. And that is why the strongest soldier on any battlefield is never the one holding the weapon. It is the one who refuses to abandon the ones who cannot speak for themselves.